Thy various works, imperial queen, we see, how bright their forms, how decked with pomp by thee. Thy wondrous acts and beauteous order stand, and all attest how potent is thine hand. From Helicon's refulgent heights attend, ye sacred choir in my attempts befriend, to tell her glories with a faithful tongue. Ye blooming graces triumph in my song. Now here, now there, the roving fancy flies, till some loved object strikes her wandering eyes, whose silken fetters all the senses bind, and soft captivity involves the mind. Imagination, who can sing thy force, or who can describe the swiftness of thy course? Soaring through air to find the bright abode, the imperial palace of the thundering god. We on thy pinions can surpass the wind and leave the rolling universe behind. From star to star the mental optics rove, measure the skies and range the realms above. There in one view we grasp the mighty whole, or with new worlds amaze the unbounded soul. Though winter frowns to fancy's raptured eyes, the fields may flourish and gay scenes arise. The frozen deeps may break their iron bands, and bid their waters murmur o'er the sands. Fair Flora may resume her fragrant reign, and with her flowery riches deck the plain. Sylvanus may diffuse his honors round, and all the forests may with leaves be crowned. Showers may descend, and dews their gems disclose, and the nectar sparkle on the blooming rose. Such is thy power, nor are thy orders vain, O thou, the leader of the mental train. In full perfection, all thy works are wrought, and thine the scepter o'er the realms of thought. Before thy throne the subject passions bow. Of the subject passions sovereign ruler thou. At thy command joy rushes on the heart, and through the glowing veins the spirits dart. Fancy might now with her silken pinions try to rise from earth and sweep the expanse on high. From Tithion's bed now might Aurora rise, her cheeks all glowing with celestial dyes, while a pure stream of light o'erflows the skies. The monarch of the day I might behold, and all the mountains tipped with radiant gold. But I reluctant leave the pleasing views, which fancy dresses to delight the muse. Winter austere forbids me to aspire, and the northern tempests damp the rising fire. They chill the tides of fancy's flowing sea. Cease then, my song, cease the unequal lay. Phillis Wheatley was born around 1753 in West Africa, probably between present-day Gambia and Ghana. She was forced to endure the Middle Passage from Africa to America when she was about 7 or 8 years old, and brought to Boston, where she was sold as a domestic servant to John and Susanna Wheatley. They called her Phillis after the name of the slave ship that brought her from Africa. Encouraged by her owners, Phillis Wheatley quickly became literate and began writing poetry that soon found its way into local newspapers. Notwithstanding the prejudices against her race, social status, gender, and age, Wheatley became the first published woman of African descent in 1767. She gained international recognition with her funeral elegy on the death of the evangelist George Whitefield, addressed to his English patron, the Countess of Huntingdon, and published in Boston and London in 1770. By 1772, Wheatley had written enough poems to enable her to try to capitalize on her growing transatlantic reputation by producing a book of previously published and new works. Unable to find a publisher in Boston, in part because of racial prejudice, Wheatley and her owners successfully sought a London publisher and Huntington's patronage in 1773 for her poems on various subjects, religious and moral. Phillis Wheatley's trip to London with her master's son to arrange for the publication of her book was a turning point in her personal and professional lives. Her 6-week stay in London enabled her to establish a network of associations that included many of the militarily, politically, religiously, and socially most important people in North America and Britain. She arrived in England a year after a court decision declared that slave owners could not legally compel their slaves to return to the colonies. Phillis returned to Boston shortly before her book was published. Within a month of her return, she wrote a friend that she had been freed, quote, at the desire of my friends in England, end quote. She had apparently agreed to return only after her owner was compelled to promise to free her if she did. Several of Wheatley's poems demonstrate a nuanced treatment of slavery unrecognized by some of her critics. For example, written in October 1772 to celebrate Dartmouth's appointment the previous August, quote, "To the Right Honorable William, Earl of Dartmouth, His Majesty's Principal Secretary of State for North America," end quote, is one of the most carefully crafted poems in the 1773 volume. In it, Wheatley reappropriates the concept of slavery from its common metaphorical use in the colonial rhetoric of discontent, which described any perceived limitation on colonial rights and liberty as an attempt by England to enslave white Americans. Wheatley appears to use slavery in this conventional sense in the poem. "No more, America, in mournful strain, of wrongs and grievance, unredressed, complain. No longer shalt thou dread the iron chain, which wanton tyranny, with lawless hand, had made and with it meant to enslave the land." But Wheatley's reference to her authority to speak against this conventionally metaphorical slavery reminds her readers of the reality of chattel slavery trivialized by the political metaphor. "Should you, my lord, while you peruse my song, wonder from whence my love of freedom sprung, whence flow these wishes for the common good, by feeling hearts alone best understood. I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Afric's fancied happy seat. Such my case, and can I then but pray others may never feel tyrannic sway." Having gone to England as an enslaved African Briton, Wheatley returned to the colonies prepared to embrace the free African-American identity that the American Revolution soon made available to her. Her anti-slavery stance became more overt once she was free than in her poems published while she had been enslaved. She denounces slave owners as modern Egyptians in a letter to the Indian Presbyterian minister Samson Occum that was widely reprinted in newspapers in March 1774 throughout New England as well as in Canada. Wheatley increasingly came to believe that the colonial struggle for freedom from Britain would lead to the end of slavery in the former colonies. In her poem, quote, "To His Excellency General Washington," end quote, Wheatley pledged her allegiance in 1776 to the revolutionary cause, hoping that even the most eminent slave owner in North America would ultimately apply the revolutionary ideology of equality and liberty to the people of African as well as European descent. In 1778, Wheatley married a free African American from Boston, John Peters, with whom she had 3 children, all of whom died in infancy. Their marriage proved to be a struggle, with the couple battling constant poverty. Ultimately, Wheatley was forced to find work as a maid in a boarding house and lived in squalid, horrifying conditions. Wheatley did continue to write, but with growing tensions with the British and ultimately the Revolutionary War, weakened enthusiasm for her poems. While she contacted various publishers, she was unsuccessful in finding support for a second volume of poetry. Unfortunately, Phillis Wheatley died in her early 30s in Boston, Massachusetts, on December 5, 1784. Wheatley was the first person of African descent to publish a book, and consequently the first international celebrity of African descent. She also founded the literary tradition of English-speaking authors of African descent. Although Wheatley never met her contemporaries Jupiter Hammond, an enslaved African-American poet, Philip Kwekwe, an African-born Christian missionary to Africa, or Ignatius Sancho, a renowned contemporaneous African-British author, they all knew of her and her writings. Sancho called her a genius in bondage. Soon as the sun forsook the eastern main, the pealing thunder shook the heavenly plain. Majestic grandeur from the zephyr's wing exhales the incense of the blooming spring.
Soft purl the streams, the birds renew their notes, and through the air their mingled music floats.
Through all the heavens what beauteous dyes are spread, but the west glories in the deepest red. So may our breasts with every virtue glow, the living temples of our God below, filled with the praise of him who gives the night, and draws the sable curtains of the night.
Let placid slumbers soothe each weary mind, at morn to wake more heavenly, more refined. So shall the labors of the day begin, more pure, more guarded from the snares of sin. Night's leaden scepter seals my drowsy eyes, then cease my song till fair aurora rise.